Welcome, thrill seekers and secret keepers, to a new edition of Secrets Behind the Stars. Tonight the air in our studio is thick, almost humming with the weight of a love that can no longer hide behind polished smiles. If you thought the stormy music of a rafta belonged only to fictional worlds, brace yourself, because the confession we're about to revisit has more raw power than any script. We are opening the door to the most unguarded night of a star who decided, for once, to stop performing and let her heart speak for itself. Before we dive into this tide of emotion, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single heartbeat. Tap that like to send a little kindness her way, turn on notifications, and if you want to support our sensitive storytelling, the join button is lit and waiting. Come with us, walk beside Yağmur Yüksel on a night when silence finally cracked. The city's whisper network is roaring. Istanbul's gossip salons and midnight chats are glowing with a single tale, a private, intensely emotional night that has placed the luminous, guarded, and endlessly debated Yağmur Yüksel at the center of a very human storm. According to people who were there, quiet voices, discreet but shaken, it happened in a secluded space, in the tender hours when the moon still owns the sky. The actress the public admires for her iron composure and careful distance found herself undone by feelings she had shelved for far too long. In that late hour, the guardrails gave way. No press lines. No PR strategy. Just the sound of a heart that refused to be edited. Witnesses describe a trembling sincerity, small laughs that broke like fragile glass, and pauses in which she fought not to drown in her own words. One person said it felt like an invisible dam finally caving in. Another compared it to hearing the truth echo in a room that had been filled with rehearsed lines for years. Those gathered, accustomed to her poise, were startled by the tremor in her voice, the sheen in her eyes, the flicker of a woman waging a private war with a past that had never really loosened its grip. The room, they say, changed temperature. The moment asked everyone present to listen without interruption, to bear witness to the softest version of a star we so often mistake for a comet. As the story spread, some unkind tongues tried to reduce it to an easy headline, that she'd had a drink too many, that sentimentality was liquid and temporary. But protective sources close to Yağmur pushed back firmly. This wasn't intoxication, they insist, this was the heat of grief finally escaping the cold metal of restraint. It wasn't a glass speaking, it was a wound. The voice that night did not slur, it cracked. The gaze did not wander, it fixed on memories like pins on a map no one else could follow. Those who care for her underlined the obvious to anyone who truly listened: pain has its own vocabulary, and she was fluent. And then came the words that shattered the room's careful silence. In a tone that cut through the air, Yağmur admitted how deeply she still misses her former love and on-screen partner, Barış. Not as a distant chapter or a tidy footnote, but as a presence that lingers in the quiet, a name the heart keeps pronouncing even when the mouth refuses. Time, she suggested, had not dissolved that pull, it had only driven it deeper, where it could ache without witnesses. She confessed that ego had once kept her rigid, that stubbornness had posed as strength until it began to fracture her from the inside. In her own phrasing, altered by tears and resolve, she owned a truth that many fear to whisper: pride can look like armor while it quietly breaks the heart beneath it. She spoke of how she had tried to be granite, to hold her ground without blinking, mistaking unyielding posture for bravery. She spoke of a silence she chose after the separation, a silence that was supposed to protect but became a cage. It was an unrelenting hush, the kind that lengthens nights and weighs down mornings. She carried her feelings alone, she said, and with every day she postponed relief she also postponed recovery. The room understood. The people listening heard the cost of being the strong one for too long. Even stars, it turns out, can be smothered by their own constellations. As the hour deepened, she began to sketch out the private dreamscapes she'd never placed on a public billboard, the tiny rituals no one photographed, the plans scribbled on napkins and then tucked away, the promises made at kitchen tables and on set corners, the future they once spoke of as if it were a house they were already building. Between sighs, she returned to a single revelation: the wall that kept her from certain steps had a name, and it wasn't fate. Pride can be a locked door you mistake for shelter. She admitted that the refusal to reach out, to take that first step, had not made her strong. It had only carved a punishment she carried every day that followed, disguised as decisiveness. Those close to Yağmur explain that she has been working at a punishing pace, turning long hours and layered scripts into a shield. The red lights, the choreography, the endless rewrites, they let her stand upright when her heart wanted to fold. But compression has consequences. If you bottle every feeling and run faster to escape it, some night, somewhere quiet, your breath catches and the bottle explodes. That night was the bill coming due. And for the first time, the tabloids say, the public glimpsed what her friends have always known. Behind the dazzling talent and the burnished image is a woman learning how to be human in real time. Insiders predict that after letting so much light in at once, she will step back, retreat into quiet corners to tend to the cuts that confessions always leave. And what of Barry's Bactas? For now, he remains silent, a silence that speaks as loudly as any press release. Silence can be shelter, it can also be a question. Hearts around the city are asking their own. Have you ever kept someone at arm's length because your pride wouldn't let your arms open? Have you watched a chance drift because you refused to take a single step? Tell us your stories in the comments, and if you value the way we cradle these moments with care, consider pressing join. Your support helps us lift fragile truths without dropping them. After such a night, it's impossible not to turn and stare at the old photographs in the hallway. The tale of Yağmur's unguarded hours reminds us that a love we label over often continues breathing in the attic, patient and stubborn. Once again, the oldest debate in the book rings through living rooms and taxis and group chats. If you have to choose, does pride guard you or does love save you? And in the city's rumor circles, another question replays like a chorus. Was this release a single night's meteor shower, or the beginning of a new weather pattern, one that will pull two orbits closer again? The echoes didn't evaporate with the sunrise. Those who know her well weren't startled by the content of her confessions. Whispers have long suggested that the imprint of Barry's never faded. But the nakedness of her words, uncoached and unvarnished, shook everyone anyway. Witnesses recall how she teetered between wistful laughter and sudden tears, speaking a language braided from then and now. She expressed regrets without dramatic flourish, as if recounting a simple fact. There were things she should have said when the door was still open. And she admitted that the steel persona she cultivated for years had become a weight she could no longer carry. The love she once held for him, she said, occupies a sanctum inside her, a quiet room that time hasn't managed to lock. Leaked fragments hint that she didn't only talk of longing, she also catalogued the small fissures that grew. Misread glances, worn-out schedules, the tug-of-war between duty and impulse, and yes, that ghostly hand of pride resting on every decision. Taken together, those pressures wore down a bond that once looked indestructible. She ventured a truth most of us learn the hard way. Sometimes two hearts adore each other, and still, they choose silence. Not out of malice. Out of fear. Out of habit. Out of the belief that being the one to bend means losing the game, when it might be the only way to win the life you actually want. With the whispers came a flood online. Fans traced her recent captions. Those melancholy lines and storm-touched song lyrics, those images of lone streets at blue hour, and saw them with new eyes. Were these tiny lanterns floated across the digital sea, meant to guide one particular sailor back to shore? Was she speaking to everyone while really addressing one man? It's the kind of decoding the internet loves, and the lack of any formal statement from her only deepened the ache of speculation. It is said that when the heart is raw, official language sounds like a foreign tongue. Some sources believe she's still sorting through the shards of that night, trying to understand what was catharsis and what was direction. Maybe, they suggest, a long-deferred door will finally be approached. Maybe she'll walk right past it and choose a different horizon. Perhaps there will be a message written but unsent. Perhaps there will be a call that rings and stops. Only two people know the weight of the decision, and one of them has chosen quiet for now. The other has just chosen to breathe where everyone can hear it. What is certain is this: that unguarded night reminded the public that the star from a rafta isn't a marble statue. She is a person who loves like the rest of us, messy, brave, contradictory, and who can be wounded by the very qualities that once made her shine. The gossip world is holding its breath, counting the heartbeats between now and whatever comes next. Because sometimes a single midnight confession rearranges the furniture of an entire life. Sometimes, the softest words carry farthest. And so we close this special report here at Secrets Behind the Stars, though the story itself refuses to end. The saga of Yağmur and Barış lands like a lesson on every doorstep. Pride can be love's most persuasive enemy, wearing the costume of strength while it steals the future you wanted. What do you think waits beyond this moment? Is this a final page, or the first sentence of a return? Drop your theories below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to become part of our family, and share it with every romantic who still believes in second chances. And if you wish to lift this channel in a special way, the join button is right there, open like a door that invites you in. Let's not rush away from the quiet brilliance of what happened. Picture the room again. The hush between words. The ache testing the edges of her poise. Pride is a fierce teacher, but love is the curriculum we never finish. How many times have we refused to write the message because vulnerability felt like surrender? How many mornings have we justified silence as wisdom, when it was only fear dressed well? If anything, last night was a textbook on what courage can look like, not a grand gesture that fills a concert hall, but a simple sentence whispered with trembling conviction, a truth told plainly to people who might repeat it. Outside, the city was almost kind. The early lights softened windows, vendors rolled up shutters, and the streets carried fewer cameras than usual, as if even the paparazzi had decided to keep a step back. Those close to her, friends, colleagues, the people who know the difference between her smile for the lens and her smile for the kitchen table, closed ranks without tightening the noose. They understood that care is a quiet verb. Her team, we're told, is choosing gentleness over spin, letting the fever break on its own instead of prescribing a statement to cancel out a heartbeat. Sometimes the wisest thing to say is nothing at all. As for Barış, he remains a silhouette at the window, deciding what the moment demands. There is dignity in his stillness, and mystery, and 1,000 possible paths. Maybe he's measuring every word because he knows that once language escapes, it can't be gathered back. Maybe he's listening for the difference between nostalgia and need. Maybe he is simply waiting for the echo to fade so he can tell the difference between his voice and the city's chorus. Whatever comes, it will arrive in its own time. What we witnessed through whispered accounts was not scandal. It was human weather. A star stepped out of the immaculate sky and stood in the rain without an umbrella. And yes, the world stared. But it also understood. The truth is that courage sometimes looks like admitting you were wrong about what strength required. It looks like acknowledging that the first step you never took became a story you couldn't stop telling yourself. Perhaps the hardest apology is the one we owe our own hearts for leaving them in a waiting room for so long. Here at Secrets Behind the Stars, we will stay with this story, not to wring it dry, but to honor the pulse that made it matter. We'll listen if a new chapter begins. We'll listen if it doesn't. There is power in witnessing, in staying present without intruding, in holding space for a love that may be ending, may be transforming, or may be quietly finding its way back to where it first learned to breathe. Until then, take care of your own confessions. If someone is on your mind tonight, do not let pride rewrite the message. Even a single honest line can tilt a future. We'll leave you with this. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one brave enough to soften. If last night taught us anything, it's that the world does not implode when we stop pretending. It expands. And in that expansion, there is room for forgiveness, for humility, for calling a name you thought you had locked away. Subscribe, share, and if our way of telling these stories matters to you, press join and stand with us. We'll be here, with open ears and steady hands, waiting for whatever the next sunrise brings to the horizon of Yağmur, Yüksel and Barış Baktas.